Just out of curiosity, just plain old curiosity.
Oh, well, we are live. There it goes. So,
Okay.
stream is starting, and this stream we were talking about economics and capitalism specifically, um, and about how there's a surprising lack of education on the topic. People think they understand economics, and anytime I have had conversations with people about it, their understanding is either completely off base, or it is or they show that they've been misinformed. And I myself was in this boat about 6 or 7 years ago when I started looking into actual economics. And so, well, I've got S-Man with me and JJ.
Yep.
And just want to hear you guys' thoughts on just what's your general understanding of how economics works.
Okay. To completely start off with, I first heard of capitalism back in December 2016. So I will admit I've only known of the existence of capitalism, communism, and socialism for excuse
What?
me, for about almost 10 months now. So I will admit, yes, I am a bit new to the game.
Okay, so and you're in your
Yeah.
20s, right? Your early 20s. That is insane to me.
No, I'm not
Because
in my
that's
early
stuff that I
20s.
learned in grade school. So that was
16.
stuff that I was learning in fourth or fifth grade. I was learning about
I'm I'm in
I
the
was
10th I'm in the 10th grade, mate, and I'm only 16. So, I mean, if
okay.
I was in my 20s
Oh, I
and
thought
I
you said
and
you were. Yeah, I thought you said you were
no, that
21.
yeah.
Man, you guys are young. Okay, so that's a
Capitalism,
little more
yeah.
forgivable. Okay,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
still, that's
capitalism is an economic system and an ideology based on private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. And its characteristics central to capitalism include private property, capital accumulation, wage labor, voluntary exchange, and a price system and competitive markets. There's one thing I want to start off with, I guess, means of production is usually I hear socialists and I guess Marxist
yeah.
socialists saying we want the workers to own the means of production, and they don't really give a reason why. Oh, the workers can do okay without the
No, that
bosses, and
well,
or something like that.
they've listed the reason why, or normally the reason why is the workers are the people who are doing all of the actual production. They're putting in the time, they're sacrificing their life and their energy to create products, and they're earning wages. But the people at the top are earning all of the money. So that's why they're like, oh, well, then the people who are running the place should actually, they should actually own all of the they should own the full product of their labor as opposed to the smaller end of that. That is their complaint or their perspective.
I think it's ridiculous because, quite frankly, first of all, I know this analogy might sound absolutely ridiculous, but hear me out here. With people, like for instance, parents are responsible for their kids, and without the parents being involved, the kids would be without a home, or unless they end up in an orphanage. So I admit this analogy isn't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Without the bosses there and the CEOs, which they do, I believe, according to some, would be 60 hours of their job a week or something, and under I guess I'm only speaking for the states. I believe it's 80,000 pages of regulations they have to go through, which I don't know how many pages you can get through in 1 week. I'm sorry, that's a bit
No,
insane. And I doubt that the employees can be really good leaders, because I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I would make a perfect leader. I don't know about you. I don't know about JJ, but and they say that there's examples of workers owning the means of production just fine or something, and
well,
usually there's no citation.
there's one really good example that I know that I wish I could remember the name of it, but I'll mention actually I'll look that up in the meantime. But JJ, I want to get your perspective. Where are you coming from in all of this? What's
Well,
your
actually, I've heard about communism. I found out what communism actually was by the time I was 14 or 15 because I was wondering, what did it? Why do we hate them anyway? Then my stepdad told me that it was pretty much that everyone shares the wealth, but in actuality, it's like people on top actually end up taking all the wealth, and everybody else is like fucked over. And of course, I've known
Mm.
what I've known what capitalism has been for a while, because I did research on that one before I did communism, apparently. And socialism, maybe about a year ago. About a year ago, I learned about what socialism actually was.
Wasn't it? I think it was Cole Ham in the Twitter chat. I think it was him who says you need a bit of socialism to have capitalism, or something along those lines.
Oof. What?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he said,
yeah. Okay, so I did look. So it's called the Mondragon or Mon. Yeah, sorry. I gotta double check, make sure I'm not mispronouncing that. Okay, yeah, it is. It's Mondragon. It looks like Mondragon. I don't know if that's.
I think maybe that's how you pronounce it.
But it's a Spanish.
Mondragon or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it's a corporation, and it was started by a Spanish monk, if I'm not mistaken, and that is the only form of successful communism or socialism that I know of, because while it is mostly run under, well, it's operating in a capitalist system because they're operating on the free market, but the actual business itself, the executives are limited on how much they can actually earn, and it's only a multiple. I think it's like it's a maximum of 10 times the lowest wage earner in the company. So there's a curb on how much the executives can own. So even though they're getting paid more because the executives are, they're in charge and they're managing things and they're doing way more than the actual people underneath. The other thing about that company is so essentially, the means of productions are owned by the workers, but if you look at the actual industries that that company is involved in, it's pretty much all procedural. It's all insurance and paperwork, financial management, and stuff like that. So I don't know exactly how they can claim that is a seizing the means of production when they don't actually produce anything. So but that is an example of. That is the only example that I've seen that is actually like, oh, that actually makes me question some of the things I know about capitalism and some of the principles that I've come to understand. That is actually a company that I need to look into and see if that model is applicable to other industries. But it seems to work really good for them. That company has been in existence and has been profitable, and they took and it's a very small, like there's not that many employees in it, and yet it's still a huge company, like several $billion in net worth. Okay, so it seems like you guys are kind of on my side. I was hoping we could get somebody else who was kind of coming from the opposite perspective.
Like a feminist.
Like a socialist. Like there's some pro-capitalist people,
or someone who's criticizing capitalism, because there are critiques of capitalism, and that's the position that I was in about 6 or 7 years ago, where I accepted a lot of things about capitalism, but I'm like, oh, look at all these things that are wrong with it. And so I was like, there's got to be a better system than capitalism or communism. We got to come up with something new that fixes that. And then that was about the time that Ron Paul came on the stage and his presidential run, and listening to him speak, and he was talking about a bunch of things. That's what introduced me to libertarianism, and he brought up some. He brought up some points about economics in general, and then I was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting, and I don't think I've ever heard those perspectives before. So then I started researching the stuff that he was written, and that led me to, following led me down the rabbit hole. I guess that's an overused analogy, but it's still applicable. So then I started watching lectures and reading stuff from Milton Friedman, and then that led me to Friedrich Hayek. So, okay, if you guys haven't, let me pause here and say, who or which, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? What authors or well-known figures involved in economics have you guys read? Like, is it just stuff in your textbooks, or have you actually gone to the sources?
To be completely honest, I wouldn't say author, but I've seen videos of people talking about capitalism, like, and I understand this might sound a little cringeworthy to point out, but people like Mr. Dapperton, Warcorp 666, people who talk about capitalism and their arguments as to why they believe capitalism is the way to go.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
so this is kind of the perspective that I think a lot of people take, and so while that is helpful and beneficial, and it's kind of one of those weird things where there is a lot of information out there, and you could spend your entire life researching it, and generally people don't have that much time to invest in that sort of thing, and you know it's really, really time consuming to read everybody. So usually you rely on someone who has read all that and can kind of condense it into a smaller format. So I'm not knocking that, but I'm just trying to get a overall perspective. So I know Mr. Dapperton, I subscribe to him. I think I'm on his Discord channel. I haven't posted much or read too much out of there, but for the most part, he seems to be pretty on point with some of the points that he's making and a lot of his content.
When you said that they wouldn't have a lot of time to do the research, there's a Marxist I argue with on Twitter a lot, and I'm pretty sure JJ knows who I'm talking about. Who's like, oh well, capitalism's the reason why they wouldn't have all that time. For instance, this.
All right, keep going.
You don't know what you're talking about, you fucking pleb.
Here's the thing. This guy blames capitalism for Donald Trump's election. He says capitalism was the reason.
It's kind of plausible, but I don't see that as a downside. Like, I voted for Trump, and while recently he's kind of fallen, he's no longer at an A plus. He's kind of sitting around a B minus, but
mine's still pretty good.
Yeah, B minus is still passing, so.
Yeah, I mean, I would have voted third party, but that's just me. There was just.
If Austin Peterson had gotten the vote, I would have voted for him. But since Gary Johnson had it, and I did vote for Gary Johnson in 2012, but I could not vote for him again this time around.
He's mad.
His stance on gun control and his stance on forcing companies to bake cakes for religious for essentially a religious service. If like, hey, I don't want to bake a cake for that, he was like, oh yeah, I would make them, and you're like, you're not a libertarian, man. I don't know how you're a candidate.
I wouldn't complain.
Do the research.
Cake, hell yeah.
For me, I'm considering because I actually took the political compass test, and it put me as a center right winger on the libertarian side. So I feel like I'm going to do the reading up on it to see if that's where I really want to go. I did kind of consider if I could vote, I probably would have gone for Evan McMullen. He's independent. Like, there's a few of his viewpoints I thought were stupid. He was against same-sex marriage, and to me, I don't really give a damn about same-sex marriage. If you want to marry a dude, fine. I don't care. That's none of my business. Abortion, that's a whole different discussion for another time, but
yeah.
I mean, I'm pro-choice in the sense it's not my body. I don't give a shit. And
we'll definitely get into that on a future. So I plan on doing a stream on every Thursday from here on out. So on my channel.
Yeah.
Nice.
But, back onto capitalism. Which, out of curiosity, I've heard some people say left socialist libertarianism, or I cannot exactly remember how it's put, but they argued it was either socialist libertarianism or leftist libertarianism or something like that. Was oxymoronic. Or I can't remember exactly how, but what would your
socialist libertarian doesn't make any sense. So there are something that is actually considered legitimate, which is anarcho-socialism. That's not libertarian in its nature, but that is something that Noam Chomsky is one of the famous figureheads for, because he subscribes to that ideology in that he thinks corporations would be worse than a government. And so in his mind, it's like, okay, I think we can have a society without any kind of government and without any kind of corporations, and it would just be the people all helping each other. But if that wasn't possible, then he would rather have a government in charge rather than corporations. So, I mean, that's from his perspective, but I'd say that is ultimately flawed in its inception, because if you look at the history of the world, which organization or which body or which structure has led to more death and destruction and and abuse of power? Has it been corporations or has it been governments? I mean, just looking at the last 100 years or so, how many people has so even Standard Oil, which was broken up because it was considered a monopoly, and Microsoft because it was considered a monopoly, and now Walmart and all these other, and Google people are claiming now as a monopoly. How many people have they killed? How many people have they imprisoned? How many people have they starved to death? Compare that to the single government of North Korea. Now, would you rather have Walmart in charge of that country, or would you rather have Kim Jong-un in charge of that country? My vote would be Walmart. Walmart,
and also,
all of its greed and all of its killing mom and pop organizations, I'd rather have them in charge than their current regimen.
Yeah, and also, I remember pointing out to that Marxist socialist, I pointed out to him that there was about 85 million to 100 million reasons to dislike communism. And before he went with this whole not true socialism or not true communism bullshit, which is a total no true Scotsman, he went, if you want to play by this game, look up how many people have died by the U.S. foreign policy. I Googled it, just American foreign policy deaths, and the number I got was 20 million. Which I'm not saying that makes it A-okay, but yeah, 20 million by U.S. foreign policy compared to 85 million to 100 million deaths under a communist regime. I provided a link to it, and he still,
was there a time frame for that? You're talking about the U.S. foreign policy. Was that for the U.S.'s entire existence, or was that for do you remember what the time frame was on that?
I got the article right here. Since World War II, according to Global Research. Okay.
According to them. Time frames, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
What's up?
Okay. That's what I wanted to establish. Yeah. What?
Zach talked to us on Cancer Podcast. He said, "Read the chat, guys. I think you might have someone who's left-leaning who wants to join your stream. I will go check it out.
I will as well.
I will go check it out."
That's something I need to do. I need to have the chat pulled up, or the stream pulled up, so that way I can actually monitor the chat while I'm on here.
You know what would be great?
Yeah, definitely.
You know what would be awesome? What if Google Hangouts could have the ability for the stream chat to be imprinted on the video? So when you look back at it, you can see it. All right.
I think it's Gentleman's Fury.
Yeah. Okay, so Zach is in the chat. So is Gentleman's Fury. He's saying high five to HUMANE. He says capitalism is an individualist ideology of the individual gaining wealth, while communism is a collectivist ideology with financial strictures. I think he means structures for the government benefit. I can be a devil's advocate and the ideas of socialism/communism, left-leaning libertarian.
Okay, so the left-leaning libertarian doesn't make sense to me, but I know that there's I think that would be more of the social conservative, but financially let's see, authoritarian.
Yeah. And I just want to point out I don't agree with the authoritarian and the left or right. And here's the thing with people is they pointed out, and this is just something I wanted to touch up upon because it's people say, for instance, fascism, like people say it's ultra-capitalist. Like they say by definition, which if we go to the definition of fascism,
Fuck fascism.
Yeah, the definition I got, it doesn't really say anything about capitalism. I mean, it doesn't necessarily say anything about capitalism. It says a government system led by a dictator having complete power, forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism, regimating all industry, commerce, etc., and emphasizing an aggressive nationalism and often racism. Where is capitalism involved in that? And also, people argue, you can make an argument for communism being fascist, and that capitalism cares about the individual, and communism is for the state. And doesn't anarcho-communism seem like an oxymoron? Anarchy, or somewhat of an oxymoron if we were talking about it.
Anarcho-communism is impossible. Anarcho-socialism is theoretically possible, but I don't think it would be sustainable, and I don't think it's
But
And I think
like
it's flawed in its inception.
I believe anarchy, by its definition, is well. There's several definitions to be fair. The anarchy definition is a state of disorder due to absence or non-recognition of authority. That's what anarchy is by the definition. Absence of government, that's the noun. And then there's a second definition saying absence of government and absolute freedom of the individual regarded as a political ideal. And communism, you'd have to rely on the state.
Yeah, that's why
Yeah.
that's why I don't think anarcho-communism is possible, because in order
It
to
isn't.
communism is socialism plus a government structure to enforce that socialism. You can't therefore have a structureless system while having something to enforce the rules of socialism. That's why it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty damn close to sympathizing with some socialist talking points, like the environment, like they'd say capitalism is hurting the environment. I did do a co-op response with Zach about a video called "Capitalism in the Third World," and me and him are planning on doing a second co-op response about I believe it was common misconceptions about socialism, where this guy is trying to debunk the anti-socialist arguments, where he point out Venezuela, North Korea. I
Are we
cannot
gonna
remember
invite that guy?
I don't. First of all,
I'll send the link in the live chat, I guess.
Oh yeah, you did. I see it.
yeah.
So,
As for
there's not on there to
yeah,
make it too big of a deal.
yeah.
Because it would be nice to have somebody who's actually arguing from the other side. While I can make points as to why the other side, then I am like, but I got to show why that's immediately wrong. And so I don't know if you guys watch Stefan Molyneux, which I subscribe to him, and he's the one who actually pushed me over the edge. So before I was just a libertarian and a staunch advocate of capitalism, all that sort of thing. Watching his stuff over the years, he was the one who kind of like, so I've watched a bunch of other people who are kind of the same perspective, like Tom Woods, Walter Block, David Friedman, Milton Friedman's son, and they all have kind of a similar perspective as far as an extremely minarchist government. And then I started hearing the arguments from Stefan Molyneux and from Walter Block, and I was like, oh, you know what? And David Friedman, another one who is a staunch anarcho-capitalist. And so once I kind of started hearing their arguments for it, I'm like, oh, you know what? I thought I was a minarchist, but this anarcho-capitalist stuff is actually starting to make a lot more sense to me. Yeah. And so while I don't want to dedicate this stream to that, this stream is mostly just economics and capitalism in general. I think we are going to do another. I'm going to do another one next week, and that's where I want to talk about, because my brother will be on, and he's kind of the other position. So while he is in favor of capitalism, he does not agree with me on the anarcho-capitalist side. So at least that's where I want to save the anarcho-capitalist side for that. And so for this stream, I will be arguing from the minarchist perspective, not necessarily the anarcho-capitalist perspective.
Yeah, and
we have two people new on the stream.
I can't stay long because I gotta hit the sack in a few minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
I know that
we also have another addition. So we've got Loudmouth, who just joined us, and Vincent. Is Vincent? Are you
I was streaming with Tyler Preston a minute ago. We were talking monster movies. It was fun.
Yeah. So Vincent, are you Gentleman's Fury?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay. I got my little Godzilla.
Oh yeah.
For the monster.
All right.
Vincent, are you a...
So where do you fall on this? Are you in favor of communism and socialism, or because you said you could argue the opposite perspective? Is that...
I personally am not in favor of them, but I can see the reasoning behind them as opposed to actual implementation.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, and so this is what I was. The reason I was bringing up Stefan Molyneux is he's just came out with a book called The Art of the Argument, and as part of that, he's having debates with people, trying to going over some of the ideas in his book about how to actually have a debate that's actually meaningful and actually is positive. It actually beneficial, as opposed to a lot of the arguments that are happening right now, where it just becomes a screaming war, and then it resorts to ad hominem attacks, and it's just a string of fallacies.
Yeah.
So he actually had Lauren Southern on there, and I was Yeah, I was very much impressed with her ability to argue against capitalism, because that's something that you don't often see. When somebody's arguing for something, like say they're arguing for communism, well, this is I gotta maybe this is from my own personal perspective. Often they don't even know their own perspective, so they're arguing for communism and they're saying all these things, and I'm like, wait a minute, have you ever actually read Das Kapital? Because I have, and I'm like, and then I'm naming things, and they're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm like, wait, how do you not even know the core principles of your own ideology, and you're trying to tell me how my ideology is bad, and then they don't know my ideology. So it's kind of like, how can
I'm
you
an
argue
idiot.
against something if you don't know it? You need to know both sides, which is why I was extremely impressed by Lauren Southern, because while she is a libertarian capitalist leaning individual, she was able to make very valid points in arguing for arguing against capitalism, and I think she did an excellent job of stating, okay, these are areas that people focus on. These are areas that people see as flaws in capitalism. And I mean, in some of those areas, there is no solution at the moment. And I thought, yeah, so if you guys want to check that out later, I definitely recommend that. It's Lauren Southern versus Stefan Monalou. It was one of the best debates I've seen all year.
I'll definitely look that up.
Yeah. I've heard a little bit about Stefan Molyneux. Not a whole lot. I've only known of him for about a few days now. There's a few videos I've wanted to check out. One is called An Honest Conversation with a Communist. I mean, I've seen some of his videos where it's just the camera trained on him the entire time, and you can hear the guest in the background. And just things like that in general. I think I'm sorry I had to leave really quickly. I was having some tech issues. So what was exactly being discussed before I left again?
No, we were just
It
trying
just
to
had
get
to do with Stefan Monalou.
That's just an interesting
Stefan
name.
Monalou is he's
Molyneux.
Canadian,
that's
I
how you
believe.
say it.
But
I think
well,
isn't he?
it was his debate with Lauren Southern. So while they're both pro-capitalism, they were arguing like this is how a debate should happen, because
So she was playing devil's advocate.
she was playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
She did an amazing job of arguing for communism and against capitalism. It was, and that's what's missing right now.
That sounds like an interesting one.
Yeah, that's
I'm gonna
what
go look that
seems to be missing from a lot of people on both sides is not only do they not understand their own ideology for the most part, they don't understand the core concepts. Like I had this crazy debate with somebody on Twitter where they were actually arguing that Marxism is not the same thing as socialism. And I'm like, Marx is the one who either he founded it or he at least popularized what is now known as socialism and communism.
It would be the overthrow of capitalism. Like Marxism is the overthrow of capitalism with socialism into the realization of communism. I believe that's the definition of it. And
how can you have those without Marxism to begin with? Marxism is the foundation. That's like saying, that Christians exist outside of Jesus Christ. And you're like, but they're followers of, like, how does that make any sense?
It doesn't.
Yeah, you can't have Christianity without the New Testament or without the Bible. And if you're saying that you have socialism without Marxism, it's kind of like he's the founder of it. He's the guy who popularized it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I mean, the concepts of socialism predate Marx.
Yes, I do want to get into that. Although socialism as we know it now is all attributed to Karl Marx. A lot of the arguments that are made about, the proletariats and the anti-bourgeoisie and the power to the workers and all of the flaws pointed out in capitalism, that's all stems from Marxism, and people are making those arguments and saying, oh, but that's not Marxism. And you're like, but those are direct quotes from his book.
A lot.
Yeah. Also, just out of plain curiosity, what do you guys think of the claim Hitler was a socialist?
Seems accurate in ways he was.
He was.
Yeah, I saw
socialist
party. He was social.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also, there was a quote of him
sorta.
being a quote of him shitting on capitalism, and oh god, I would argue with Marxists and other dickheads
yeah,
on
see-
Twitter, and some people you just can't
Marxists
argue
are some of
with.
the dumbest people I've ever.
Okay, so the ideas created by Marx in his book and all of that sort of thing laid the foundation for fascism. So fascism and communism are both the brainchilds of socialism. Those are two sides of the coin when it comes to that particular. Oh man, now we've got another guy in here. It's
Oh God.
getting a little crowded here, but oh well.
Yep, we're up to 6 people in here.
Yeah.
Loudmouth's
So
gonna be leaving soon.
I mean, so if you're actually looking at history, you can see how fascism splintered off of socialism as a counter
Yeah.
to communism. But they're both rooted in socialism, and socialism is rooted in Marxism. You can't
Yes.
have
Yeah.
one without the other. It's
Socialism
So okay.
was
yeah,
a
go ahead.
byproduct of the feudal times, and nobility is basically what that came from the
Huh?
bourgeois, like you said, bourgeois. Well,
Yeah.
back in like serfdom, basically was back in the day in the medieval times, and that's where socialism came from. It came as a reactionary movement to those things.
Oh.
Yeah, and
That makes sense.
yeah, I would actually say socialism goes back even further. When you start looking into economics, there's something called the tragedy of the commons, which is one of the oldest. The oldest economic principles. People were talking about this back in ancient Greece when you're talking about the days of Aristotle and Plato and all of that. They talk about the tragedy of the commons.
That's what I was gonna say. If you read like ancient Greek philosophy, you can see kind of early strands of socialist thought even way back then. So
Yes.
the whole concept of socialism did not originate with Marx.
No, the modern version.
It was
of
just developed.
Yeah, the modern
Yeah.
version.
By
The
Marx.
modern version of it is from Marx. Although I would
Right.
say socialism has been around ever since humans have been interacting with each other.
Yeah.
Because of,
Yes.
as illustrated by the tragedy of the commons. So if you're not familiar with it, the illustration
I'll check
that
that
I've
out.
always been presented with is, so there is a plot of land, and 4 different shepherds are using that same plot of land, and so they're taking their sheep out there, and the sheep are grazing on the grass, and eventually all the grass gets eaten up.
Fair.
And so then nobody has any grass, and then all their sheep die, and then the shepherds either go, they either starve themselves, or that entire society crumbles.
Yeah.
That is the problem of the tragedy of the commons. And when you actually analyze why that occurs, it's because first all the 4 shepherds go out there and they start grazing their sheep, and there are no problems. But over time, portions of the land become a little overgrazed, and so then the area keeps shrinking and shrinking. And as it shrinks, the shepherds are looking around like, oh, I've got to get my sheep out there, and I've got to overfeed them now, because if I don't feed my sheep, then my neighbor, one of the other 4 shepherds, he's going to go out there and he's going to graze his sheep. It becomes a first come, first serve type system.
Yes.
And so even though there is enough resources for everyone, there's a tendency to overuse those resources, so that way at least you get something, because if you don't use it, then somebody else is going to use it, and then you're going to be SOL later on.
Yeah.
And the solution to the tragedy of the commons is the introduction of private property. If that same portion of land is divided into 4 equal sections, each shepherd has their own section of land, and then they're like, okay, now I need to properly manage my section to make sure my sheep don't overgraze, to make sure that I have a renewable resource, that I'm not overusing my stuff, because if I have them eat all of the grass in my section, I'm SOL.
Yeah.
Right?
Quick question, just out of curiosity. I've heard people argue whether or not humans, if incentive, capitalism gives incentive to do things,
Yes.
or something along those lines. Do you believe that we could achieve that under socialism?
No, because I think socialism removes that incentive. It takes people back into a situation like the tragedy of the commons, where it becomes a first come, first serve situation. If you're not able to guarantee that you have a steady source of a resource, or that you can manage your own resource, and it becomes if I don't take it, somebody else will. If I don't, and then it becomes a situation like this is the statement that Marxism made famous, is the from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Right?
Yeah.
Well, if it's all based on need, well, then I'm just going to have to find a way to say, I need it more than you. I need it more than you, because if I don't prove that I need it more than you, you get it, and then I get nothing.
Yeah.
So that is what it builds, and that's why you can see continually why these structures kind of collapse on themselves.
Yeah.
Is over time, people start realizing, oh, if I don't make a case why I need this, then I don't get it. Oh,
Yeah. Are you all right, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm headed out. I'm nodding off, guys. But I'll see you guys. I'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Thanks for stopping by.
No
All right.
problem.
Yeah. So this is a funny example, but have any of you guys seen Office Space?
Unfortunately.
No.
And I guess
Oh
that's
well, he's gone. I haven't seen it. Unfortunately, I haven't heard of it until you just brought it up.
you need to check it out. It is what's his name? The guy who did Beavis and Butthead. I want to say Judd Apatow, but that's not the name. It's Mike Judge. Mike Judge.
Is
it's
it
one
on
of his
YouTube?
old classics. I don't know if it's on YouTube or if it's on Netflix or anything like that. But it is a cult classic for a reason. I mean, it is actually it's a great movie. If you have any, it's extremely about the tech industry. Anyway, there's a scene in there where one of the guys named Milton. There's a birthday party, and they're taking slices of cake, and they're passing it around the group. And there's one guy, Milton, they hand him a piece of cake, and he's supposed to hand it to somebody else who's further back. And then, so he gets his piece of cake, and he's holding on to it, and one of the ladies in the office is like, no, you have to pass it to somebody else. Everybody needs a piece. And he's like, but last time, I didn't get a piece, so I'm going to hold on to my piece. And then she's like, no, and she rips it out of his hands, gives it to somebody else. And so then he starts passing pieces, and at the end, he's left with no piece at all, and everybody else has a piece, and they all just walk away, and there's no more cake. And then he's like, I'm going to burn this place down.
I wouldn't blame him.
That's the central idea. I mean, it's only like a 30-second clip or something like that, but that illustrates beautifully the problem that occurs with socialism. Is you're always supposed to pass everything around,
Yes.
and somebody at the end is going to be left empty-handed, and they're going to be like, well, this system's messed up, and next time things are passing around, I'm just going to take it and not pass it around.
Yeah.
And you get, all it takes is one person taking out of the system and not giving back, and then the whole system starts to shrink and shrink and shrink until, boom, it collapses.
Yeah. I believe there was a clip I used in a video response to somebody. It was called Why Socialism Doesn't Work. I'm going to see if I can send it to the Twitter group, the Cancer Podcast, if I can find the original clip. It was it was an analogy. You got two men in a room, oven, table, the ingredients, cookies. One scenario is, if I can find the video, I think it was one dude just sits on his ass and does nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guy just bakes the cookies, 4 cookies, and he literally does all the work. They point out if he gives him one cookie and he takes the other 3, that's just generosity. But imagine if you have a third entity going into the room and taking one of the cookies away from the baker and give it to the other guy who did nothing, that you would have, the guy would realize, no matter what, whether I bake these cookies or not, I'm going to get the same no matter what. And then he loses incentive to bake cookies, and then there's no more cookies to redistribute, and boom, it falls. That's just the clip I remember finding, and I can't remember how the guy rebutted that whole.
He actually tried to rebut that, because that is exactly what we observe in history time and time again. And so he calls it a straw man version of socialism. I'm thinking, how in the fuck is it a straw man version of socialism? How? It's exactly what happens time and time again. And so, like Loudmouth was saying, and I guess some of the other guys have said as well, socialism isn't a new concept, because if you look back at American history, the colonies, 2 very important colonies, Plymouth and Jamestown, they tried socialism. It wasn't called socialism at the time, but it was essentially, if you look at what they actually did, they were applying a socialist type system where everybody worked together. They combined all the city's goods into one central one central store, and then people would take out of that store whatever in order to feed themselves or whatever. And I mean, both of those colonies almost died for the first year that they were there.
Yeah. I have a quote according to this one guy in the comments of the video. He's quoting Ben Shapiro apparently.
Mhm.
Socialism is rape. Capitalism is consensual sex. Thoughts on
Yes.
that, guys? I mean, and to be
Yes.
honest, it sounds kind of accurate. I know it's fucked up to laugh
100%
at that, but
It actually is. It's very accurate.
and I mean, if they could show, if these Marxist faggots could show that that socialism and communism could work, and everyone would be happy, and everyone wouldn't bitch and complain, then I'd be
Yeah.
fine with it. But I don't think that's going to work. And I mean, okay, this is a question. I remember I was watching this debate with War Corp 666. It was his second debate with Owen McDonald, and Owen's first question was, "How can you justify wealth inequality?" And I feel like you already did that. So, his first question was, "How do you justify
Yeah.
wealth inequality?" And I feel like HUMANe just did that. So, in a sense,
yeah.
with the
Okay,
whole
so
It
analogy.
wasn't Jamestown, it was Williamsburg, so
Yeah.
I was mistaken on that.
Oh yeah,
I
it was
looking that up
Williamsburg.
because I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure. 'Cause there's two people. There was so John Smith was the one who actually said, "He who doesn't work doesn't eat," and he was actually quoting from the Bible, and that's what happened in Williamsburg. Because Williamsburg had that system where they were like, "Oh, let's just store all of our goods in one place, and then whoever, then everybody can just take out of that whatever they need." And then the first year, like it
nearly
was
died.
half of the colony died, and the rest of them were starving to death. And then they
Yeah.
got rid of that system, and they said, "If you don't work, you don't eat." So they made
Yeah.
exceptions for people who were sick and the elderly who weren't, couldn't provide for themselves.
Yeah.
So those were the
Also,
exceptions, but everybody
yeah.
else, you're providing for yourself.
yeah, and let me ask you guys
the next
something.
year is
Question.
when they had the first Thanksgiving and all that sort of thing because they had more than enough to feed themselves the next year.
Yeah.
So it was,
Quick question.
Mhm.
Wasn't Marx an intellectual?
well, it depends on what your idea of intellectual is, but
At least
no.
slightly intellectual. Because I mean,
no,
good. Because I was about to say intellectuals wouldn't have developed a new form of socialism, because they would know, hey, what happened in Williamsburg if it tanked.
Yeah.
So why would you put that into a bigger a bigger government store like the United States or Russia or whatever?
Yeah, and can I just ask you guys this? What is? Can anyone show why it's bad to say he who doesn't work doesn't eat? I mean, people are like capitalist
Nope.
apologism,
not-
and
Oh, no, it's my bad.
Let me make sure I get this quote right because so George
agree with that.
Orwell said, "There are some ideas so absurd only an intellectual could believe them." That is an amazing quote. I want to make sure I got it right, and that's what I would use to describe George Orwell. So the guy who wrote 1984.
people are arguing George Orwell was a socialist. They're saying, fucking hang on.
Yeah, so he was kind of the Noam Chomsky kind of leftist socialist. But I mean his observations of the issues with communism overall are spot on. So I think his conclusions were wrong,
Yeah.
but his analysis of the issues was dead on. And that's another situation where Karl Marx, his analysis of problems that occur under capitalist systems were amazing. His insight into this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. That part of his work is actually incredible. Like, because nobody else was. I mean, people were looking at hey, this is a problem, and they weren't narrowing it down to the root of the problem. So I think Karl Marx did a great job of that. The problem is he came to the wrong conclusion as to how to solve it, and his solutions to all of those issues that he saw with capitalism made the situation much worse than just having it as it was.
With me, it kind of reminds me a lot.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was about to
It
say.
kind of reminds me of the dog sitting in the kitchen with the fire going on. That's how some people are. It's like, this is fine. It's like, that's how socialists are. There is a problem, but yet they don't do anything to fix it.
No, it's
Yeah.
I
Okay.
would say it's more like
gentlemen-
there's a grease fire on the stove and they pour water on it. Because I don't know if you guys know about
Yep.
that
Yeah.
won't put the fire out.
It just spreads it worse.
everywhere, and then you set your entire kitchen on fire. That is what
Yep.
socialism kind of does. It's like, oh, there's a small fire on the stove, and then they burn their house
They just
down.
make a bigger problem out of a smaller problem.
Yeah, but they're like, oh, but there's a fire. I should pour water on it because that seems reasonable, right? But anybody who has had any kind of training with that sort of thing would be like, no, that's going to just spread the grease everywhere and set everything on fire. Yeah. So that I think I forgot where I was gonna go from there, but yeah. So I would recommend that you guys actually read the original work written by Charles, written by Karl Marx. Yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. So
What's
it's
the book
Das
called?
Kapital. Yeah, Das Kapital. Even if you can't get the full version, I mean, there's audiobook versions and things like that, which is actually. So I say read it, but really I listened to it over audiobook while I was at work. That's how I read most of the books I've read. So
I'll look up
it's a little.
I'll look up
yeah.
Das Kapital.
Yeah, Das Kapital. So it's his insight into issues that exist within the United States and within Western societies that are built off of capitalism is pretty good because yes, those are issues. But I think the Austrian School of Economics, which is what I came to, which is Ron Paul is a firm believer in and that sort of thing. And there's like a bunch of the other names that I mentioned. Those are all people who are of the Austrian School of Economics. Like so Peter Schiff, it's a really, really good one. Although he's kind of a one note type person because every time he's in an interview, it's always the same message. I mean, it's not a wrong message. It's just he tends to just repeat the same kind of things over and over again. And it's mostly because people aren't getting it. And if they didn't get the first time, he's just going to keep repeating it until people actually get it. Because so I don't know if you know who he is or if you watched any of his stuff. But he was actually one of the people who, before the dot-com bust, was saying this is a bubble. And he had all of his investors and he invested himself fight against the dot-com bubble. And then the dot-com bubble burst and then he made himself rich off of that. And then he was saying, okay, well, now they just moved that bubble. They moved it to the housing market. And then he was waiting for the housing market bubble to pop. So, and that's, so when it did in 2008 is the official year that the bubble burst. But it was more like it's the actual deflation occurred at around 2006. That's when the bubble got a hole in it and it proceeded to burst completely open by 2008.
Do you believe it's incorrect to say, for instance, I was arguing with the same Marxist, he's like, capitalism is going to cause another economic recession. I think he was referring to the United States. Yeah. And I argued, in my video response, I said that, well, we got ourselves kind of out of we got ourselves out of the Great Depression. We got ourselves out of the 2008 economic recession, or at least we've gotten ourselves out pretty far.
So
that's like
those are some ugly times.
I disagree with you. And so that is from the Austrian perspective. So that's something that I've come to understand, and according to everything that I've learned about it, seems to be more accurate. So the Great Depression was actually prolonged by all of, and this is something I think Aspie brought up last week.
I don't mean to bring up the Great Depression. I will admit I may have misspoke on the Great Depression.
No,
but it's something.
It is a popular misconception, and it's actually kind of what we're doing right now to get out of the most recent recession.
In 2008.
So the Great Depression, Austrian economics, and even Milton Friedman. So Milton Friedman is not an Austrian economist, or wasn't an Austrian economist, I should say, but he was a Nobel Prize winner, and he was from the Chicago School of Economics, which is more of a monetarist organization, although they've since gone away from that, the Chicago School. But Milton Friedman, I believe, is dead. But he's
he is.
His stuff is pretty good. But he was one of the earliest people to talk about how FDR's the New Deal actually prolonged the Great Depression.
Yeah,
because when they should have been applying austerity,
I think I heard some about that.
They should have been applying austerity, and that would have limited the reach of the Depression. And then once the market was able to readjust resources, then they could have recovered. Because there was a similar kind of recession. Was it? Oh, I want to say it was in 1912 or 1911. So I mean, it's not.
I think it was 1911.
Yeah, so it wasn't that long before the actual Great Depression. It was a similar set of events, and the market recovered nearly. I mean, it was less than a year that it was in a downturn. So I mean, the market crashed or whatever, and then resources were redirected, and the market recovered, and then everything went on from there without it, back to good. And then again, the market crashed in the 1920s during the Great Depression, and it should have had a similar recovery time of about 6 months to a year, and then the market would have been back to where it was and then in growing. Instead, it extended
like 5 years.
further. Yeah, it extended much further because people were trying to fix the situation. And so Milton Friedman and the people of the Austrian School of Economics were like, if they had done nothing, the market would have recovered on its own, and it would have cut off like 4 or 5 years of the actual Great Depression.
Yeah,
so
and
that is their interpretation of it.
Yeah, and out of curiosity, do you believe, like some people argue based on the New Deal and how they interpreted it, that it sounded like some socialist. I don't want to misquote anybody, but I can't remember how it was exactly said. But people were arguing this. It sounded like there was some socialism mixed into what he was going for.
No, the New Deal was incredibly socialist in its inception and its implementation.
I remember hearing about this in American history.
Because their solution to it was so this goes back to another economist. I suggest you both look into these guys.
I will.
Maynard Keynes, who is I'm not sure if you've heard of Keynesian economics. And actually, the first time I heard of this was so there's another YouTuber called Julie Borowski. She's a libertarian YouTuber. And her big video was she was saying Obama was a Keynesian, and so I was one of those people who was clicking on it because I didn't know what Keynesian was, and so I fell for it. I'm like, oh wait, I thought this was a video about her talking about Obama being from Kenya, but this is Keynesian economics. She's arguing that. I was like, oh, that was pretty clever. That's a pretty good one. But that's what got me into that's what started my investigation into Maynard Keynes versus Friedrich Hayek. Oh, and there's a great video. I will send the link.
I also I'm going to also send a link to the Twitter group because I think HUMANE here is going to have if you want to see this, I have a playlist of economic debates I plan on watching at some point. There's about 14 of them. Huh?
Okay, so there's 2 videos. Fear the Boom and the Bust, and Fight of the Century. So there were these are rap videos, like epic rap battle of history style videos about economics from 2 economics. I don't know if they're professors. I don't know if they were professors at the time or they're just students. But one is arguing, they're making the case for the Keynesian stance as he's pretending to be John Maynard Keynes, and the other guy is pretending to be Friedrich Hayek. And they're having a rap battle based off of the stuff. And it's amazing because the actual lyrics to the song, a lot of them are pulled straight from their books. It is brilliant. It is actually a really catchy song as well. The first one is kind of The Fight of the Century one is like, that is really well done. And a lot of the cast members in the video are also economic, either lecturers or professors. So I thought that was a pretty interesting. So
how long is the stream going to go for?
I think you said at least
for
90
another
minutes.
half, I normally go for about an hour and a half, and we started at 5:30ish. So about another half an hour. Actually, did I actually link? No, I did not.
But I linked everyone the playlist on Twitter of the economic debates I've found on YouTube. One is of an ANCAP versus an ANCOM. It'd be really cool to see an ANCAP and ANCOM, and I don't know what you call an anarcho-socialist abbreviated, ANSOC or something, or in a
ANSOC. But see, the anarcho-communism makes 0 sense to me. But I've had people try to argue for it, and I'm like, but you can't have communism without a government. That's the entire.
Yeah. It's like saying communism, I am a Christian atheist or I am a LGBT Muslim. It's just you can't be both. You have to have one or the other.
Yeah.
And
you can't have anarcho-socialism and you can't have anarcho-capitalism, but communism is a government system. It's I mean, unless they're
And-
using some other definition of communism, which I think might be the case. They're using a definition of communism as in they're using communism the same way they should be using socialism. Because socialism is an economic structure.
Yeah. And
Communism is that economic structure with a government backing. Same thing with capitalism can't exist without a government, or I mean, that is the proposition of the anarcho-capitalists.
yeah,
But it can
and
also exist in our current form, like with the well, maybe not our current form, but the origination of the United States, where it was capitalist was the system of economy, and then our republic was the system of government.
yeah.
But we've kind of steered way
Moved away
far
from
away
it.
from our roots. Now
Yeah,
we are
yeah, we
now we
have.
are falling more and more into communism with
Yeah.
Obamacare,
Well, we were talking about economics in
Medicare,
general.
Medicaid.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Obamacare, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, it can only hurt. So I know this is that this is something a lot of people are like, oh, if you're against Obamacare, then you hate the poor people and you hate people who can't afford healthcare. And I'm like, no, Obamacare makes it worse. I don't know,
Because they force you to have it. Like you have to get it. You'll get fined if you don't have it.
Yeah.
Which I don't believe. I thought that was absolute bullshit. I mean, if you don't want it, fine. I'm not going to force you to.
Well, you have to
mean,
think about so there's a huge misconception where people assume healthcare and health insurance are the same.
They don't sound the
So-
same. Healthcare and health insurance. Health
Yeah.
insurance.
Yeah, well, that's the
Um,
thing. Is Obamacare does not actually provide healthcare. Obamacare forces people to buy health insurance. It doesn't actually force people
Oh.
to get healthcare. It's
Yeah.
a perception, and it's flawed, and it's. I mean, this is like I know George Orwell was on the left and that sort of thing, but that's exactly the warning or the things that his book was entirely warning about. So if you hear something is Orwellian, that's because its name does not match its implementation.
Yeah.
Anything that is, if you ever hear Orwellian or Orwell-esque, something along those lines,
Yeah.
it's because it's something like the Freedom Act, and then if you actually read the act, it's like, oh wait, this is actually going to make people, this is actually putting people into slavery, or the Patriot Act, which is something we recently passed in our country. That if you actually read it, and you're like, wait, they called it the Patriot Act because that makes it sound, who would vote against the Patriot Act? And if you look inside it, you're like, this is going against a lot of things that are actually in the Constitution that it specifically says you guys aren't allowed to do. So
Yeah.
you slap a label of Patriot on it, and then you pass it. And that's what I think they did with Obamacare. They're like, oh, well, who could vote against Obamacare? It's supposed to provide people health care. And I'm like, but it doesn't provide people health care. It provides people health insurance.
That's it.
It's how feminism is.
Well, I don't see how you get that connection. Well, over equality.
Because they
even though
say one
have
thing
it.
and they mean another thing sometimes.
Oh, there's your analogy. Okay.
Yeah.
One thing. What are your thoughts on Trump care? Because I remember it failed initially.
The only solution is to get rid of Obamacare altogether, and I would also say get rid of Medicare and Medicaid, but that will never pass. That because people are so dependent upon it, because people are they're so stuck in their ways of thinking that is the only way people can get health care is, well, if the government doesn't provide it, well, then how will people get their health care they need?
Yeah, people were arguing.
You have organizations that did that before Obamacare. Before Obamacare, there were organizations that help people pay their medical bills. And before Medicare and Medicaid, the same thing happened. And
what do you think of the argument repeal without replace is murder? Like they'd say if you repeal Obamacare and you don't replace it with anything and people die, it's murder, which no, it's not. No. I mean,
so
it really isn't.
What they fail to realize is it's already illegal for hospitals to turn away people who are in critical condition.
Yeah.
I think that is part of the problem that started the whole chain of events that required Medicare and Medicaid and now Obamacare. Things like that were intended to solve a problem, and they made it worse, and then they just keep slapping Band-Aids on top of it, and those Band-Aids keep making the situation worse. They keep slapping cures onto something, and every cure has a symptom that needs another cure to fix the symptom, and another cure to fix the symptoms of that, and the side effects of that cause. It's a stacking.
So it just makes the problem worse.
Stacking issue. Yeah. So that's what I see is the issue with the medical system. So it may be the case that the repeal without replacing may cause some people to die that would have otherwise lived, right? Because if you go to people with cancer, so while they're not in critical condition, right, they can't go to the hospital and say, hey, I'm going to die in a year and a half. You have to give me health care, and the hospital is going to turn them away because they're not in urgent care. They don't need immediate assistance. And they're like, oh, call us in a year and a half when you're coughing up your lung and you're in your death throes, and then we'll help you. So that's the perspective that people are coming from when they make that case.
Yeah, and if I understand using the definition for an argument may be a bit played out here, but the whole repeal without replace being murder, the unlawful premeditated killing of one human being by another, and I don't really see repealing a law or repealing something, and the repeal, like, it's not as if that repeal is a weapon and you just shot someone in the face with it. I mean,
well, the other thing is how are these people dying? Yeah. Is it the hospitals that are killing them, or is it the cancer that's killing them? So if they're dying of natural causes or of a disease or a virus, how can you say that it is the person who refused to treat them or could not treat them? How is it their issue? That's the fundamental problem here, and that's why I don't think people have a firm. So even though they may understand the basics of economics, they haven't thought these things through, because in order to provide someone care for a health issue, that costs the hospital money. That costs the doctor time and energy in order to help provide those services. And the people who want things like Obamacare and want a universal health system, they want people to provide those services without expending resources. And you're like, you want something for nothing, and that's impossible. You can't do that. And you mask that situation by calling it other things, by mislabeling it and pretending that it's something other than it is, and it's a service for a price. That is everything that we do, everything that we humans, all human interactions. It's a service or a good for a price, and the reason it has a price is because. And so this is another issue, and how are we doing on time? So this is something that let me think a little bit about how to actually word this. So the reason we have businesses in the first place, and I know some people, and this is kind of my perspective several years ago, they're like, oh, charities are much better than businesses because charities provide a service or whatever, and all of their money, everything is provided through donations, and they don't require people to pay for their stuff. They're just providing good with none of the bad. But the problem I see with charities is charities couldn't exist without businesses. Yeah. Because charities are not self-sustaining. A business is self-sustaining if it's allowed to run as a business. And that is the entire purpose of creating a business, is people need this service or this good. How do I I don't want to just give them it one time. I want to keep giving it to them as long as they need it. And charities can't do that. And governments can't do that either, because governments also rely on businesses to provide the resources. So charities rely on businesses to generate money that they use to buy, that charities use, or donation of goods and services to those charities that the charities then distribute. Same thing happens for government. Although charities is definitely more benevolent than a government, because a government demands those resources so that way they can distribute them. A charity says, please give us these things so that way we can distribute them. A business says, I have these things, offer me something in exchange for them, and then you can have these goods and services. So in my mind, this is something that I had to, this was the hardest concept for me to actually get into when I was looking at Austrian economics. I'm like, no, charities are much better than a business. Business are corporate and evil, and they shut down mom and pops and all that. And I'm like, but then the more you think about it, the more you're like, okay, if I wanted to provide something to someone, like, so say someone needs cancer treatment, right? They need steady medication. If you left that to a charity and that charity ran out of money, what happens to that cancer patient? They die, right? But if you had a business and their entire goal was to make more money by giving people cancer treatment, then they could continually provide that person the cancer medication as long as people were paying that company, as long as that business maintained profitability. So that in my mind, that's a better system for everything, because it is self-sustaining. Like with charities, they often lose their funding, or they often can't do enough. So there's a lot of demand for whatever they're offering, but there isn't enough supply. Whereas a business can scale its supply based on demand, because they're offering an exchange for an equal exchange. So an equal product for an equal amount of money, or an equal, I mean, that's how we tend to think of it. It's like, oh, they're always after dollars, or they're always just after the bottom line.
Yeah.
But you have to think about what that bottom line represents. The bottom line represents value for value.
Yeah.
They are trading goods and services for your time and energy, or your products, or yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what you said there. What do you think of the argument that I hate having to repeat this because it's I don't know how it sounds. Okay, do you believe under socialism we wouldn't have any homeless people?
No, that's insane, because if you look at history, there were thousands of people who were not only homeless and starving in the streets under the USSR. I mean, like that's where most of the people died. They died kicked out of their house and starving to death.
Complete Pharisee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also,
I mean, it's that's absurd. And the reason they were kicked out is because under the system of socialism, even though it's from each according to their ability to each according to their need, there's also the tenet of, you have to work, if you must work in order to eat. So, and when somebody doesn't work because they either can't, or they're like, what's the point of working? I work for 80 hours a week and I get this, and I get nothing or I get very little in return for that. And so people stop working, and then the government's like, oh, but you didn't work, so you get kicked out. You're not a part of our system. Get out of here. You're a leech upon society. And it's like, well, when someone's putting everything they have into it and then getting scraps in return, that is the natural. Eventually everybody's just going to admit defeat and be like, you know what, I'm just going to take my chances outside of the system, because in this system it's just I'm getting overworked and underpaid, even in socialist society.
Yeah, and to me, I'm absolutely fine with the notion of if you don't work or something like that. If you don't work, you starve. I'm sorry, and I also try to be as independent as possible. I don't believe in forcing people to pay for my shit. I try to be even for my age, I try to be as independent as possible. And if I need to ask for help, I'll ask for help. And just things like that. And I personally, since I am now legally old enough to enter the workforce, besides those, if you mow my lawn, I'll give you $20 or something. I do it for me. I mean, I don't mind giving it to my parents so they can save up for stuff. That's fine. But for the most part, I do it for yours truly. And people argue that capitalism makes people selfish, but socialism and communism have you rely on the government, and that sounds like it breeds laziness, it breeds selfishness, and unproductivity under communism and socialism. Things like that in general.
And I don't know if I've been talking a lot, but this is the area that, of all the things that I talk about on my channel and all the things, this is the area that I've done, I think, the most research upon it. So I've got a lot of perspective on this. So hopefully I'm not, and it is my channel anyway, so fuck you guys if you say I'm talking too much. Anyway.
I don't mind. I like to hear.
So what you were talking about there. Okay, so man, I did lose my train of thought here. Okay, so there's two things I want to say about that sort of thing. Is when it comes to socialism, socialism doesn't produce more than it consumes. And this has been the case in every example where it's been implemented. And the best way to illustrate this is in the amount of innovation. Compare, if you look at the list of U.S. inventions, during the same time frame that the USSR was in existence. Compare the differences and innovations in those two societies. It is ridiculous. It is almost 100 to 1. Like in the same time period that the US was introducing the computer, the internet, we went to the moon, allegedly. A huge number of innovations and all of these crazy things that the US economy was creating and putting into existence and patenting. And in that same time frame, there's like 50 or 60 from the USSR, and most of those things are not in existence anymore. The only products that the USSR is still, or what is now Russia and a bunch of other countries, but is the Kalashnikov, the AK-47, which is actually, surprisingly a well-made product coming from a socialist country.
Yep.
The Rubik's Cube and Tetris.
Yeah, that's all. Like, I was arguing with someone about
vodka
what
has been around before the USSR and after. So, but those are the only three things that came out of the USSR that people actually know and use.
Yeah, and I was actually arguing with I was making a video response to someone who's like, capitalism is an enemy to video games, and it's like, what the fuck what has communism done
makes
to
no
video
sense.
games?
Oh.
I will send you
That
the link
legit.
if you want to. If you want
Yes.
to,
No, it's
I'll send you the link to the video.
Video
the
games
guy-
and capitalism are partnered.
Oh God, I want to see
It's
video
that.
games could not exist without capitalism, and that's what I was saying with socialism not consuming more than it produces.
And doesn't capitalism reward good behavior? Like, if a video game has shit quality and you think that company is a piece of shit to their artists and their employees and what the fuck ever, if you think that's the case, you can take your business elsewhere. You know, it's like the YouTube analogy. If like when YouTube gave $12 to a racist to some racist who made a fucked up video, and companies were freaking the fuck out, and they took their business away from YouTube. I mean, that I would say is an example of capitalism rewarding good behavior.
Yeah.
As I search for the video, you can give your thoughts about that.
And punishing bad behavior.
Yeah.
So there's another. So I wanted to continue with this idea that communism and socialism do not produce more than they consume, which makes them either they stagnate and they became, they sit at equilibrium, which apparently is something that people want in those communities. We don't want things to be better or worse. We just want them to stay the same. Well, that's what that's called in any other system, right? It's called stagnation. And stagnation is the equivalent of a death, because all it takes is one catastrophe, one natural disaster, and hey, we've got this equilibrium, and we just lost, and the whole system collapses. All it takes is one catastrophe. Whereas what JJ was just saying, or they consume more than they produce, so they never reach that equilibrium, and they just start falling and like, hey, we started here, and then we just go and go.
Yeah.
So there is a quote that I want to say while I'm thinking of it. How do you amass a small fortune?
How?
Start with a larger one. that is
a
what
small one of
communists
$1 million.
always try to do, right? You notice how they never try to implement communism in Southern Africa, right? In Bosnia. What's the other one? Zimbabwe. They're never like, oh, let's go to Zimbabwe. Let's set up a socialist utopia. Why do they always try to come to the countries that actually have money and actually have prosperity and try to do socialism there?
Yeah, why not try those poor countries? I think
work like they anticipate. That would be like the ideal. Like, hey, let's build it from the ground up, and it should be. We should outpace the United States within a few years.
I think I've heard someone address this. It was from the same Marxist socialist who says that whenever a country tries to get away from capitalism, like a communist or socialist nation, like they try to go to communism or socialism, they argue the United States will retaliate by putting embargoes on the countries or doing some violent or just retaliation, whether it's violent or something, and tries to stop that country in any way they can from heading towards socialism or communism. That was just that guy's explanation. For instance,
you see the inherent flaw in that, right? I hope you do. So, what happens if if every other country outside of the United States goes communist and embargoes the United States?
The United States would be fucked.
Yeah.
No. The United States is self-sustaining.
Yeah.
The United States, because the
that
United
makes
States
sense.
is capitalist. the United States will be like, well, we're not going to be as prosperous as we could be, but we've got enough here. We can support ourselves.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean,
so yeah, so while our amount of progress right now is is growing exponentially because of trading with other nations, there's nothing stopping. Well, the reason the United States got to be a world superpower in the first place is because we had a system of capitalism, and we were so proficient at self-sustaining that we were building up our wealth and amassing our production values in the United States that we caught up to all these other countries that have been around for centuries.
yeah.
I mean, the United States is only, what, 200 years, a little over 200 years old?
Yeah.
And we caught up to these countries that have been around for, centuries or thousands of years prior to the United States.
Yes. Okay, I sent you the link to the video, HUMANE, if you want to do your own rebuttal of it. It's pretty stupid. I've already refuted it a while ago, but it's ever so stupid. And I mean, I think the strongest point is that capitalism does reward good behavior. I mean, let's say HUMANE was a video game developer, and let's say JJ here found out HUMANE was not paying his employees what he should, thinking that, wow, what a piece of shit. So he takes his money and goes to another company. And I know this might come down to a difference of opinion here, but Tetris is fucking boring. And as I played it once, and it sucked.
What?
You guys might like it, but it's fucking boring.
It is not something you can play like World of Warcraft. You can spend years on. League of Legends you can spend years on. Tetris you can spend a day on, and then you're like, dude, I'm not gonna play that.
Whoa! Oh, shit.
I think I just killed him with that.
Oh god!
But I know League.
That everyone is what happens when you.
I know League of Legends is toxic, but it's not. It's not
that. Your mention.
Good.
Yes, I just that mention of World of Warcraft or League of Legends. It just my webcam couldn't take much more of that.
No. World of Warcraft has been around for 13 years. Right?
Holy
or is
crap.
it
Nerd paradise.
13 years or is it 11 years? It's been around for more than a decade.
11 years.
Yeah.
I believe it's like that.
It's a nerd
it's
paradise.
Been around for more. How many people still play any other game that was created 10 years ago? Like, I mean, on a regular basis.
Nope. I don't do that.
Even with updates and patches, and I mean, very few games achieve that. Tetris is not one of them. Tetris is one of those games you have like that nostalgia, and you'll maybe go back and play every once in a while, but you don't play it daily.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It gets dull. It gets mundane.
Yeah, where there's like games like Counter-Strike, which haven't seen a significant update in years, and people are still playing that.
And there's
that one's growing almost in your mark.
Call of Duty. They might produce the. Oh, for fuck's sake!
Oh my god!
This is the problem with having your. Okay, if this falls one more time, I'm just turning off the fucking camera.
Right.
I mean,
anyway. Hour and a half mark. But maybe we'll go a little bit longer for this stream.
God damn it.
So,
oh my god.
Okay.
You good?
Yeah.
You good?
I think I'm okay. Okay, this
hope.
game, Call of Duty, I think they kind of have a similar story. They might change things up a little bit, but people still play it because they find it very interesting. And if people want to buy a piece of shit video game, that's their choice. I, for instance, I find sports games very skull-fuckingly boring.
Yeah, and how do
That's
they
what you're into
every year?
That's what you're into.
Madden still flies off the shelf every year in the exact same game. Oh, but the player names are different and the stats are slightly different. And you're like,
yeah, but it's still the same game.
There's some differences when it comes to graphics and all that, but it's generally the same game.
Yeah.
The Grand Theft Auto series. And you notice.
I lost interest in Grand Theft Auto after San Andreas. San Andreas was amazing. And then Grand Theft Auto 4 was kind of And then Grand Theft Auto 5, I'm like, no.
Grand Theft Auto 5.
I love Grand Theft Auto 5.
I agree. Like, my thing is, I played for at least 2 weeks after I beat the game, and then that's the one thing I don't like about beating the game is then you're kind of done with it. I mean, with Grand Theft Auto 4, if you compare it to Grand Theft Auto 5, you notice there's some positive differences. The cars are easier to control, but in Grand Theft Auto 4, the rain's more realistic, the car crashes are more accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Those
it's the
games
weirdest
kinda
thing.
got a little too repetitive for me. It seemed like the same pretty much the gameplay. You could go back and play San Andreas right now, and I mean graphics are a little but overall the game plays pretty much exactly the same between all the different versions of it. There's very little.
Yeah, and
like the difference
I'm not the
between Grand
biggest.
Theft Auto 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3 was huge, but after that, it's
Yeah, I wasn't all that much of a fan of episodes of Liberty City. I just, especially with if you go to a certain website on the game, it's something about pageants. You automatically get 5 stars, automatically.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
There's a website. It's on the game, where if you go to the website, it will say this page has been shut down, your IP address has been logged, and there's an investigator going to see you. And when you get off the
Okay.
computer and you get into your car, you automatically get 5 stars. And you, my friend,
Oh, God.
I've never been able to evade 5 or 6 stars in Grand Theft Auto 4 or episodes of Liberty City. Once you get 5 stars, you are
You're
fucked, my
fucked.
friend.
Yeah.
well, unless you got the tank, and then well, I think that was a little why Grand Theft Auto 3 and San Andreas were more fun for me, because they were so glitchy, and you could abuse the glitches and all these crazy cheat codes where you could actually fly a tank.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys ever played that.
Yeah. I abused the glitch in the game in Grand Theft Auto 5 once, where I couldn't die. I could fall out of a helicopter. I could be shot in the face. I could have all these things happen until for some reason I drowned in water and that killed me. Awesome. I did get to invade the military base in the prison for about 5 minutes, and then I was blown away by the military. The prison police just shot me.
All right.
Now, I
Yeah,
guess with
we're getting a
closing
little off
statement,
topic, and
but my closing thoughts on capitalism.
check with you guys. So, would you guys mind going for an extra half an hour, because this is actually a complex topic, and there's a whole other
Maybe.
area that we
Actually,
haven't
I don't
touched on
mind.
at all.
I
Okay.
don't
sure.
I
mind.
had to take a shower in a little while.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
We have
it
video
doesn't have
games
to
thanks to
be-
Now, if you want to
capitalism.
speak of the same game for PS3, for Madden 16, Madden 17, it's the exact same thing, just with new players. It's like, why the fuck am I wasting money on this goddamn game?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's your money.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, and yeah.
Thanks
That's
to
the beauty of
capitalism.
evil capitalism. Which here's the hypocrisy. Here's something I wanted to bring up here. Do you guys find it a hypocrisy for communists and socialists to whine and bitch and piss and moan about capitalism with these bad boys, where they'll be like, give me this
That's
Android
ironic
phone, or
as
give me this
fuck,
I just
iPhone.
call them a bunch of lazy faggots.
They'll
Yeah, well,
retweeting.
yeah. The fact that
That's
they
ironic
resist
as fuck.
capitalism.
the fact that they can do it
Sure.
over their cell phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That capitalism
Yeah,
made
and-
for you.
Yeah, and without capitalism, I'm not sure if you'd have these, or if you did, they probably wouldn't be as good of quality. And
Yeah.
No, they would cost an
You
arm and a
wouldn't,
leg.
I don't think.
yeah, and
Yeah, it
overall,
literally
with
costs one of these and one of these.
yeah, I
No,
saw a meme.
so-
I don't know if this was an anarcho-capitalist or just capitalist meme. Shows an it's either a communist or a socialist or an ANCOM or ANSOC. But like, give me this brand new gold deluxe iPhone 6, what the fuck ever. All right, here you go. Throw some money. Resist capitalism, and the capitalist is like, he's not getting it, is he? And the seller's like, shh. He's one of my best customers. I mean, it was true though. It's like they don't realize the irony. For instance, that British socialist Marxist cuck
Oh, and McDonald's.
has a computer.
I named it.
Capitalism made for him. Yep. He has a phone he uses to film his videos.
It's not just
Capitalism.
that capitalism made it. Capitalism made it. If you think about the early computers, they filled up an entire. Oh, hey,
Hello.
thanks for joining. Yeah, if you think about, yeah, we're only going to be on for maybe half an hour more, but
Yeah.
you're welcome to join us. We're talking about capitalism overall. So if you think about the early computers, they filled an
Yeah.
entire room. They were magnetic reel. They were the only people who could afford them were the government and like the largest corporations like IBM and stuff like that. And it was
Yeah.
only because there's incentive in capitalism for people to make things affordable, to outcompete their, what's out there, to make things better, cheaper, faster for consumers. That's the only reason we have personal computers today, and the iPhone that you're talking about.
Yeah,
It's not just capitalism made the product possible. Capitalism makes it incredibly cheaper every year or better every year.
yeah, and speaking of which, when like I understand the topic of people like what constitutes a poor person, and I know this might sound a little off the topic, but for instance, there's some phones if you get on Amazon, they're pretty inexpensive, some under $100 or under some around 50, and they work fine, or things like that, you know, like it's becoming more and more inexpensive, and
Yeah.
and whenever a communist or a socialist bitches about capitalism, it's like, it's pretty fucking ironic. You're going to use a device that, without capitalism, I'm pretty certain wouldn't exist or would cost an arm and a leg, and they just don't see it. And also, YouTube, Google Hangouts. I wouldn't be speaking to any of you people without
Without capitalism.
capitalism, and also to is a bubble. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. What are your opinions on capitalism? Because I have no idea if you're pro or anti-capitalist, or just
I'm all for free market. Like, I really think socialism is the killer of competition. It's the killer of natural economics.
Incentive.
Yeah.
It's a killer of incentive and human nature. It just doesn't. And communism itself doesn't take into account human nature. I cannot remember for the life of me who said this exactly, but I think it was one of the. I can't remember who exactly said it, but it was someone who is he said that communism, I think it was communism, can only work in small little communes, and if anyone that is not under rock or is not blind can tell, we don't live in small communes. We live in a giant nation of, at least in the States, for us, we live in a nation with over 250 million people.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's certain nations that have over 1 billion or even 1.5 people, which, I mean, it's like if someone says communism, and I think that person was a communist, can only work in small little communes, what does that tell you? And also, people argue, Venezuela and North Korea are not truly socialist, or in North Korea's case, I think they're saying it's not truly communist. Then what is it then? I doubt it's capitalist at all.
Yeah, it's the
capitalism.
It's a hermit country. It's a hermit state.
It's not. It's the no true Scotsman fallacy, which a lot of cliche Marxists are guilty of on a regular basis. That, like, it seems like maybe a decade ago. I'm not sure. I've seen AMCAPs like Hoodie Demon say this. They probably would have been, Venezuela is a perfect example of socialism. Damn it.
They were touting Hugo Chavez. Like Bernie Sanders even said this even recently. Like I think it was actually during the campaign where he was saying Hugo Chavez was a prime example that people should be following him. And then Venezuela, then it became out that Venezuela has gone bankrupt and now people are eating pigeons and they ate all the zoo animals, and then he stopped using them as an example, and it's like, oh, let's go to this other country. Let's go Sweden. Yeah, Sweden. They're and I don't know if it was the prime minister of Sweden was like, no, we are not communist. He actually was talking about their country. Well, Sweden's got other problems as well, but their economic system. They tried communism, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy, and then they had to come and be like, okay, we're getting rid of all of this, all of these programs that we instituted. We're getting rid of all of that. We're going back towards a market system, and Sweden has since started to recover. And it's only after they started recovering that Bernie Sanders is pointing to them as, oh, they're a prime example of communism, and he's like.
No,
we stopped doing that.
And Venezuela in 2017 their economic system is in shambles. Like 2003, they would have been saying, "Oh, Venezuela is a good example," and now they're going to say, "Oh, that ain't true socialism. That's not true socialism," and that's just comrade logic for you.
Every time it fails, it's not true socialism. But every time it's it's doing good, when it's doing good before they realize the problem, then it's, see, look, communism works, and then as soon as it fails, that wasn't real. Never mind. And
they constantly go with a means of production thing, and I don't know what definition they got for for socialism or communism, but the definition I had gotten didn't include means of production. I mean, so it's like that's the issue with
you're
Yeah, with
making the
definitions
problem
is
looking at the
where,
definition as opposed
Yeah,
to the actual all the stated foundation of the ideology. So
yeah. I mean,
so from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs, right? That's
Yeah.
the principle. But there's also everything that he talks about in addition to that, where he's talking about the workers are the ones who are generating all the product. The workers are the ones who are producing everything, so they should get paid accordingly. What he failed to understand is that the workers weren't producing all of that by themselves. The only reason workers were able to achieve that level of production is because they were hired by the employer, and the employer was providing them with the workspace, the tools, all of the materials. The employer is the one who finances all of the resources, and then all the worker is contributing is their labor. And so Marx is looking at the labor and looking at the product of that labor and being like, oh, well, the product of that labor is X, and it's all coming from the worker, and he ignores all of the other parts that are coming, which is 90% coming from the employer.
he's cherry picking things then.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and
so that is the problem with his and that's why he came to his conclusion, is because he was ignoring everything the employer was providing. He was saying it was all the worker. Like, hey, this worker spent 10 hours and produced a car. And he is ignoring, wait, so all the materials and the power and all these tools, where did they come from? Oh, no, they were just there. They found them on a tree.
Yeah. And I mean, and also there's some like some employees. Yeah.
She was sorry. Go ahead, Isabel.
Oh, I was just thinking the other day. So I took an econ class in because I'm a business major. I'm going into accounting, and I took an econ class, and I really think that colleges, instead of having mandatory like my college doesn't do this, but I know other colleges have like, you know, you have to take like a sensitivity class or you know, other social justice classes.
Oh, come on.
I get kicked out immediately. Oh god.
I would fail immediately. I have almost no empathy for people.
I just piss everyone off.
Okay, so I think I know where you're going with this. You think that an economics course should be something that should be mandatory.
Definitely, because most of my friends don't even know what socialism is, and they don't know what capitalism is. They just think it's big guy eats little guy. That's like their entire understanding of capitalism, and I'm like,
no, yeah, most people don't have an understanding of the basics of economics. So so while there's disagreements amongst economists, the fundamental economic principle is supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
As demand,
Yes.
so the more supply there is, and the more demand there is. Let me make sure. Supply and demand are inversely related. So the more supply there is, the lower the cost. The more demand there is, that means that there's not enough of a supply. Yeah. So the more demand there is, the higher the cost. The more supply there is, the lower the cost. And so it's the balance of those two, of supply and demand in relation to each other. Man, I did a terrible job of explaining that. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to look at a graph in my head and explain the graph. And I'm like, no, picture's much easier.
Yeah, I got a question for HUMANe. When socialists and communists are pointing to global warming or the environment, and they're saying capitalism is causing the climate change in a negative light, they're pointing out that, for instance, I believe they're pointing to Antarctica, that we're going to have to redraw it soon because of its melting and things like that, and they point out environmental things, like they're saying, oh, that's an example of capitalism being evil, and just things in general like that. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would say the fundamental problem there is the Earth was warming prior to the Industrial Revolution. It was actually getting hotter faster before we started producing the massive amounts of CO2 through our industry, through capitalism. I mean, we've got records going back that far as the overall. Maybe it's not the overall global temperature as we understand it today, but I mean, as far as the melting of the poles and the actual temperature of the Earth, we have enough data to know that the Earth was heating up drastically because we were exiting an ice age.
Yes.
So, and actually the warmest period on Earth that we have in human history was during the Middle Ages. So during the medieval times, that was the hottest the Earth was ever, and at that point, the poles were melting, and all of that sort of thing. So
And now they've
blame,
reformed, and now they're melting again.
yes,
And
so there
to,
was
to
there
blame,
was
yeah,
a lull. So the Earth heated up during the Middle Ages, and then it started to cool again, and now it's heating back up, and we're reaching a point where the overall temperature of the Earth should be a modern or tropical type climate for most of the Earth. And that's the ideal temperature that the Earth is supposed to be at. So when we're not in extreme hot or extreme cold, there's going to be several centuries of the Earth being in a moderate tropical climate.
yeah,
And that's the ideal for life flourishing, because I mean that increases vegetation, that increases animal life, that increases prosperity. That's for everybody.
Productivity.
Yeah. And I've heard people. I haven't heard people specifically blame capitalism on. For instance, you got in the United States, like you got. You guys are familiar with Louisiana, how they have like a bunch of trees in the southern part of the state, that when a ton of water comes in, the trees can kind of be a bit of a barrier, or at least slow it down, and those trees are dying off and receding. So the state is becoming more and more vulnerable, and they say that things like that, and even they blame capitalism, saying a decade after Hurricane Katrina, they're still reeling from the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and people are also blaming capitalism, saying that people were required to go to their jobs even during Hurricane Irma in the state of Florida, and if they were to escape the state of Florida to save their lives, that they would have been fired.
No, that's
complete.
I don't know if
retardation.
I mean, they tried to make my mother work during the hurricane.
I think they even said in Texas too, when they were having their shit go down. I don't know how exactly we would respond to it. So
as far as I know, that has never been the case for any other hurricane, where if somebody left because of the hurricane, because usually, and especially in Florida's case, the actual governor issued an evacuation of certain areas.
Yeah, so, he literally tweeted just. I think he just tweeted "Get out of Florida" or something like that. He just said, pretty much get out of Florida.
Get out.
It's an official. These areas need to be evacuated because those are going to be areas that are going to be hit by the flood. And if that's the case, then those businesses can't require people to work during that situation. That's a state of emergency. Same thing with Texas. Texas state of emergency was declared. So I'm not sure why businesses would order people to work during that. That seems like.
Also, it's like we have this thing about and also we have this thing about we have just have it, and also wrongful termination is against the damn law. So if
that would be a case of wrongful termination, people could definitely sue their employer if that was the situation.
Yes,
they would win that, because I mean, what jury would be like, no, they should have worked during Hurricane Harvey? Nobody's gonna side with them, with the corporation on that.
Like, okay, you get fined.
And
they get sued and they would lose. I mean, the company would definitely lose.
Also, I just want to hear you guys' thoughts, because I was talking to the same Marxist douchebag, and I said to him, I said, all right, if you were to try socialism, could it exist in a lone state? And he said it could not exist in a lone state. And I'm just smiling in my head thinking, he says we need international socialism, and I made a little joke in my head. Nazism is like international socialism.
Well, that's the problem. It can't survive on its own, and we make everything socialist. What is that system going to depend on in order to survive?
Yeah,
like if the entire world goes socialist, and if socialist societies can't exist on their own, how would the entire world survive? It would need something outside of itself to depend on, which is the claim that he's making, right?
Yeah, and if you were to ever debate him, which I doubt you would, because of the amount of retardation he has.
Is this Owen McDonald?
He makes a he makes a claim that we've had examples of people. He makes a claim.
But if this is that Owen McDonald kid, I would gladly debate him. But I mean,
he says if you want, he says contact him if you want to debate him. He says on his YouTube. And I would tune into that. Here's the thing with he makes a claim about socialism. He says that capitalism is it's colossally bad for the working class.
Yeah.
He's done that, and like his thing about it's colossally bad to the working class, which he failed to define in his video. Me and Zach and other people have debunked his video, and someone's like,
Yeah.
all right, he makes a claim about how you don't need the employers or the CEOs. They don't do shit. We've had examples of them not being there and it running just fine. Went to his description, it has no citations. And it's like, and I called him out for it. I'm like, dude, you had no citations in that video. Oh,
Yeah,
you can
well,
just
the
do the
other
research yourself. And it's like, no, you made
Yeah,
the claim. If I said the Earth is flat, people would tell me to either provide the evidence or get fucked.
Well, he's also making an error in logic there, because
Yeah.
Yes.
how did the company get to that point in the first place? Was it
Yes.
was it just there, and then this guy was like, oh well,
They
there's
come
this
from
company
Greece. Oh my god.
already running and
The
everything.
workers start
I'm just going to
everything.
put my name on it and then have people come and work for me. No, he built that company from the ground up. The company wouldn't
Yeah.
exist in the first place without him. So, or with him or her, whoever's running it. Yeah.
They.
Did
Well,
you
I-
just
the work-
assume?
Come together and
It's
Just assume their gender.
The majority of CEOs are men. Whatever.
And here's the thing, right? It's like when it comes to things like that, when it comes to CEOs, and it's like, I'm sorry, but their job sounds pretty fucking stressful. Imagine,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I could actually sympathize with an ANCAP talking point, which I think I would probably try to argue devil's advocate when it comes to anarcho-capitalism on another stream. 80,000 pages of regulations. Can you imagine? Let me see if I can pull up
there's
this book.
entire teams of lawyers, and actually, I'm getting ready to start my own business, and that's what I was talking to some guy.
plan to as well.
I was talking to the Roberto guy yesterday, and he was
Yeah.
actually he's got experience with this sort of thing. He was talking about all these things that I'm going to need to have, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even consider that. I'm going to have a team of lawyers to make sure that my company is not violating any laws. Man, that's
Yeah.
going to be expensive.
You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to
This
do
is
this."
Yeah.
You actually have
Ridiculous.
to have
Like I'm
preparation.
probably the first year that my system is going to be in place, I will probably have more lawyers than I will have employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Okay,
is
you
going
guys
to
see
be
this
the
book here,
situation.
right? Imagine
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
to read this 1,000 pages, or roughly 1,000 pages, 80 times over. And yeah, you need a team of lawyers,
What?
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
My
and
team
I'm
of
thinking,
lawyers will exceed my actual employees for my
Fuck me.
That is
yes,
ridiculous.
and
Constant law
and
after
I
law
actually-
after law.
I actually do sympathize with the ANCAPs
Wow.
on that talking point. There's just a few others I do have concerns with, but I feel like anarcho-capitalism is probably another conversation, or if you want to squeeze it in here.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to talk
Yeah.
about that next week, because we'll be
Yeah.
continuing capitalism. But
Yeah.
so most of the arguments I've made have been strictly from a minarchist, it's just pro-capitalist point of view. Next
Yeah,
week
just
I will be
yeah.
talking about specifically anarcho-capitalism versus minarchist or so this is mainly capitalism versus communism or just economics in general. And
Yeah.
the next week will
Yeah.
be regular capitalism or corporate capitalism. That's not the right word. What's the word I'm looking for? A capitalism within a government versus capitalism without a government. So I think that'll be
Yeah.
the topic of
Yeah.
next week.
I know a guy who might be interested in that.
Half an hour, really quickly.
Yeah, I know. I think I know. I might. There's a guy who basically he argues that anarchy is just for teenagers who haven't had their dick sucked yet.
Oh
and
my god.
just things like that. I had
Isn't
a-
that what Warcorp said?
No.
Boy,
So-
isn't that
Warcorp
what
No,
666.
that's
It's
DeAndre
Yeah,
Turner
that's what he
fucking
said.
faggot.
That's
War
true.
Corpse-
It's kinda
I would
true.
like to actually. I would
Oh.
like to see War
Warcorp
Corpse and
said
Humane
that?
Mind have a conversation. It was
Yeah.
War
So,
Corpse who said that. I'm thinking War Corpse,
Oh.
calm down, man. Relax.
So
I-
I would say this person has probably never read any Ayn Rand, has never read any Rothbard, has never read any Mises, has never read any Hayek, has never read any Hans Hermann Hoppe.
He was
Tom
arguing.
Woods.
Yeah.
Walter Block, David Friedman, Milton Friedman. Milton
Yeah.
Friedman wasn't an anarcho-capitalist, but the rest of those all make very sound arguments for anarcho-capitalism.
Yes.
Probably never read Basquiat.
He was.
probably-
Yeah.
These are like
yeah.
fundamental thinkers, and without reading some of the stuff without reading the cases they lay out, you can't
Yeah.
arrive at the maybe anarcho-capitalism is possible, because I plan
Yeah,
on
and-
making a series of videos, but I have to build this entire foundation, because anarcho-capitalism, just the end game, it sounds ludicrous and insane, but there's a huge foundation for it,
Yeah. I
which
think
without that
yeah.
foundation, it sounds
Yeah,
crazy.
I can quote the guy on one argument he made against Mr. Dapperton's video about it's a 23-minute video explaining anarcho-capitalism. He talks about it's illegal to collect rainwater, and he says, well, it's illegal because if an unfiltered rainwater, you're going to get sick off of it, and
Okay,
that's one of them. One of the arguments.
All right, so
I can't remember the rest, but
you know that there's entire channels on YouTube dedicated to people smashing things into their nutsack. Break.com. I mean, I don't know if it's still around there, but Break.com was an entire entire webpage dedicated to people smashing themselves in the nuts with things. 2x4s, fluorescent lights, watermelons, catapults.
Fuck.
People
I might try that.
Who are making people who make the argument that, this has to be against the law because we need to protect people from themselves. They don't care about those people who are deliberately injuring themselves on purpose for either fame or just for laughs or whatever. Like jackass.
That's their
masochism.
Those are people we call
jackass. That entire series was about them injuring each other and having stupid pranks where somebody could go to jail, and like they built a fortune off of that. And nobody's like, oh, we need to have laws to protect these jackass guys from humiliating themselves or permanently injuring themselves.
Yeah, and to be honest, and then the guy went about arguing
rainwater. You know, it's like people are allowed to be stupid.
Yeah,
you can't stop it.
Speaking of which, it's raining outside. I wonder if I'm going to go to jail for if I were to collect any. I wouldn't be dumb enough to do it, but
it depends on what area you're in. But
I
don't know how about Utah, but I don't know if I wouldn't try it.
If it's the duty of government to protect people from themselves, well, then they better go around making everybody live in a padded room and ordering them what to do every day because people are going to do things that injure themselves. It's unavoidable. Unless you're going to turn everybody into a robot.
Yeah, I've been watching some of Mr. Dapperton's videos explaining anarcho-capitalism, which is the only issue I have with some of them is just the fact that it was basically he re-uploaded the same video, except this time he didn't use the little avatar he has. He would actually just put on the suit and just do body movements for the whole 40 minutes. I'm thinking you literally did this last week. Other than that, I'm watching
Logic, and it's a little bit better than Logic because I know I was talking about with Loudmouth on this. Logic, while I like some of his content, and I think he actually does make very good arguments sometimes, I cannot get over the head bobble for 30 minutes of random head nods. And I'm making a point, but you can't see me talk because I'm wearing a mask, so I have to bob my head.
Yeah.
It's very distracting.
It's kind of retarded.
Mr. Dapperton does some body acting, like he'll move his hands around, and things like that. And genuinely, I like the guy's content. He actually followed me on Twitter, which is cool. And my closing thoughts on capitalism is, unless a socialist or communist can show an instance where communism or socialism can work and no one gets fucked over, then unless they can propose an alternative to capitalism which actually works, then they need to back off. And I don't hate socialists and communists for any other reason other than their complete stupidity and their lack of understanding how ironic it is to bitch about capitalism when something that made that made things like this cheaper and efficient. If they can't see that, then we can't help them. And if they can't realize if they can't realize that if they can't have it exist in a lone state, why in the fuck would you try it internationally? And that's my closing thoughts on capitalism.
The communist claims, it just needs to be bigger. It just needs to be bigger. And you're like, wait, that doesn't make it better sense whatsoever. Like,
that's what she said.
That's like saying, if we build a model house and the model house isn't stable, then we should build it. We should turn it into a stadium-sized house, and then if for some reason it will magically become stable. And you're like, if it doesn't work on the small scale, then it never works on the large scale. That's why we have models to begin with. That's why we start off small.
Yeah.
And if we prove the concept small, and then we grow it from there. If it doesn't work small, we don't grow it because that's insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Give your closing thoughts or.
I don't really have any closing thoughts. I don't have many thoughts in my head, but I'm gonna tell you something kind of funny about my sister. She had to read Atlas Shrugged for like, I don't know, some class. I think she only had to read like a half of it, and she like devoured the whole thing. And then she went to college and got all crazy wacko SJ dubified. And now she's like a full-on Bernie supporter, and it's just it's shocked me.
How?
Oh
I was
my
a-
god.
Last year in April,
Yeah, I
I was
know, she
a
was
Bernie
always
supporter.
like-
I regret that with every fiber of my being. And then I was a Hillary
Yeah.
supporter, and then I was an Evan McMullen
What?
supporter. I went full circle with absolute. I regret supporting Bernie in April of last year and
Okay.
Hillary in June of last year. It was an absolute disaster. I'm
I
sorry
can't
we've been
believe I supported Hillary.
mansplaining to you.
Yeah.
We should check our privilege, guys.
Yeah. What privilege? Anyway.
I'm kidding.
We're
No,
already
the only real privilege is financial privilege. Anyway.
Yeah.
How do you
That's
go
true.
from
Hear my-
so she really enjoyed Atlas Shrugged, and she really liked the
Oh yeah. She talked to me all the time about it. I was like, I don't know, probably like 13 or 14 when she talked about it, and I was like, you know, I don't care about trains and capitalism. But she was like way into it, and now she's a socialist. It's embarrassing.
how
I'd
do you
rather
go
her be
from,
that than vegan. But
What?
like that? I don't understand, because I mean, what if you actually accept? I mean, because no, Atlas Shrugged is one of my favorite books. There's this really good speech from one of the main characters where he's talking about he's talking about money and the purpose of money and what money does, and how if you're not using money, then the only other tool is with the chain or with the gun. So that is the only tool where people can interact with each other without resorting to some kind of violence or slavery. And I mean, just his speech was, I mean, it's while it's one of many speeches in the book, that was my definite favorite. And I mean, it's just amazing. But I don't know if you can read that sort of thing and come to and agree with some of the conclusions that she's drawn with her philosophy of objectivism. I actually did consider myself an objectivist for a little while. And then once I started getting into Rothbard and some of those other economists, I was like, oh, no, objectivism is pretty decent, but I think it's slightly off. It just barely misses the mark. And then Austrian economics, I think, better analyzes the situation. Still very close. And I mean, they're neck and neck with each other as far as their views on capital and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But Austrian economists take it one step further, because Ayn Rand believed that a government was required for police, for adjudication, and for national defense. But Austrian economists have taken those same principles and be like, well, we already have private military, we already have private security, and we already have private judges. Why do we need a government again? We've already proven that those systems can work privately. In most cases, they are cheaper, better, and the people who are utilizing those services are more satisfied with the service with the interactions. So if we've already proven that those three things can be handled outside of a government, what was the purpose of a government again? So that's the conclusion that led me to the anarcho-capitalism. And I guess we can kind of end it there. I didn't get into the situation where I wanted to talk about the broken window fallacy. So I guess before we
I forgot
end,
to bring that up.
yeah. So did you actually look into the broken window fallacy?
Yeah, let me pull it up. The broken window fallacy, because Aspie made it. You said he made a broken window fallacy, and
No, it's not him. This is something that is repeated ad nauseum, and it's actually something I repeated myself up until I started looking into economics. Wow, how did I make that mistake?
Oh, by the way,
Yeah, something I said a lot. I used to say wars get people out of economic situations, and I was like, look at World War II. It got us out of the Great Depression, and I used to say that all the time when I was in high school and in early college and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was after listening to Milton Friedman and some of these other lecturers about it, it actually started to make more sense. It's like, wait, how can something that destroys and wastes resources ever create wealth?
yeah,
And that's when you get into the broken window fallacy. And when somebody explained the broken window fallacy and how that is being applied to war, I was like, yeah, that's just a mind-blowing, wow, I think people have been looking at this the wrong way for years.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I guess I don't want this stream to go too long. It's already been almost 2 hours.
Don't pull a
But
loudmouth.
I think we do need to take some time to focus on that area before and we'll make this the last topic. So
Hey, yes, man.
What's
I think
up?
I have the perfect, perfect demonstration of what Owen McDonald's like. I'm sorry, but I think you're completely wrong. Pip pip shitty-o, I'm gonna stuff a crumpet up my ass.
That was random
I
shit
had
for
to
me.
do
You're
that.
just like, you're just bobbing your lips. I'm like,
I
what are
had
you
to.
on about? But
yeah,
um,
I don't get it, but whatever.
yeah, and you didn't catch the joke where you're like, I don't want to make this too long, and I was like, don't pull a loudmouth.
Yeah,
Don't pull a loudmouth.
No,
I mean,
'cause
I don't mind streaming it with him, but 4 hours seems a bit much.
yeah.
But
And this is
yeah,
an in-depth
Yeah.
topic, so I guess the longer stream format makes kind of sense. But
yeah.
we'll make this the last topic. And so do you
Hopefully
want
it
me to
doesn't run too
explain
long.
the broken window fallacy and how it's
Yeah.
applied before? Okay,
Absolutely.
so the broken window fallacy is, and actually this stems from Keynesian economics, and that's something that a lot of governments still ascribe to, even though it's been proven time and time again to be kind of wrong and to lead to things like the most recent housing crisis. So the idea is there's a store owner, like say he's a cobbler, all right? So a cobbler owns a business store. Something or someone comes by and smashes his window. He then takes money, pays to repair that window. And then the window repairman takes that money and goes to the grocery store. And then the grocer takes that money and they go and look at all of this economy that was generated from one smashed window. That is the broken window fallacy. But what they fail to understand is the counterpoint. So the cobbler has money and you smashed a window, and so it forces him to use that money to repair the window. If he didn't need that money to repair the window, he could take that money and instead pay a carpenter to add an extension to his building. And then the carpenter takes that money and he spends it at the grocery store, and you have the same flow of events, the same amount of money causing all this economic advancement. But the only difference between the two situations is one has a window, or one situation has one less window, and they still have the same economic economic outcome.
Yeah.
The only difference is one has one less window. And that is the problem that people see, is they look at, hey, look at this chain of events, all of this money being spent on war. But they fail to see, oh, well, all of that money would have been spent without the war. It would have just been spent in other areas. And so with the war, while we do have money being spent and money flowing through the system, we are losing all of the resources that were spent on munitions, all the lives that were lost. So that's labor that could have been used in a factory doing productive things, all of the time spent in the war, all of the food that was dedicated just for the fighting efforts, all of the resources that were spent just on war. And then once the war is over, they can't exactly be converted back. So that is one of the huge things with World War II. Factories were converted from what their original purpose were into the war efforts. And I mean, those factories could be converted back, but all of the product, all of the resources that were turned into guns, that were turned into ammo, were turned into bombs, that stuff wasn't as repurposable, because those were already
just like human lives, you can't repurpose.
Yeah. And so the difference between World War II and without World War II, we have similar economic outcomes as far as money is being spent. It's just we have a lot more lives and we have a lot more products had World War II not ever happened.
Yeah, and that reminds me
guys.
of when you were bringing up war, just popped in my head. One thing I think we were about to bring up is with capitalism and communism and socialism. Capitalism, to have things happen, you don't, like with communism and socialism, you'll get your way with a. You sound like you would need a gun to get what you're trying to do. Had to have. For fuck's sake, if I can get words out of my mouth tonight.
So
that's
kind of a separate topic, but I guess it's related to the discussion.
Yeah, to the topic at hand. But that was just something I needed to point out before we wrap this up.
Socialism has to always lead to communism. It is never. Socialism has never existed where it hasn't devolved into communism. Every instance of socialism has resorted to communism.
Hey, guys.
I guess there's an exception when socialism was ignored and replaced with capitalism. That's the exception. As long as the socialist ideas were trying to be upheld, it had to resort to communism.
Yeah.
So, guys, I'm gonna go.
All right.
That's all right,
have a
JJ.
good night.
Yeah. Thanks for
But,
stopping
All right,
by.
see you guys.
Yeah.
Input.
No problem.
And
Right.
it's what you were talking about is if somebody doesn't want to participate in the social system, you have to have some way to make them. Because in order for socialism to work, everybody at the table has to be playing the same game, right? If you know, for socialism, you set up, like, say there's 10 players at the table and they're all trading goods and services back and forth. If one person is like, nope, I'm not going to trade with you guys, I'm just going to do my own thing, well, that stops the whole flow of goods and services across the table. And so somebody's going to have to come by and like, no, you can't do that. You have to play with everybody else. You have to trade with everybody else, and you have to share equally. And the only way to do that would be to enforce it upon them. So that will lead to, oh, we have somebody who doesn't want to play by the socialist game. We have to force everybody to play by the socialist game, and that's where you have to have some authoritative structure.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I think anarcho-socialism, while theoretically possible, I think it would ultimately be unstable, because as soon as somebody tries to leave that system, there's going to have to be some authority figure to pull them back in.
Yeah.
Whereas with anarcho-communism or capitalism, which we'll get into next week, oh dang it, stupid phone.
I love this
Hang on a
ringtone.
second. I don't, because it goes on for forever and I cannot stop the stupid alarm. Okay, sorry about that. So with anarcho-capitalism, because not everybody is required to follow the rules, not everybody is required to participate in anarcho-capitalism. So there could be 10 people at the table all playing different games under an anarcho-capitalist system, and that's fine by anarcho-capitalist standards. It's still people can trade if they want to, or they can play their own solo game if they don't want to. So so if anybody actually takes themselves out of the system, anarcho-capitalists don't care. They're like, oh, you're just playing your own solo game? Fine, go play by yourself, and just don't make us play your game with you. Everybody gets to do whatever they want. So that system doesn't require an authoritative structure, whereas socialism, if one person tries to leave or doesn't play by the rules, there has to be someone to enforce the rules. That is the huge difference between the two systems.
Yeah. Well,
Hey,
All right.
I gotta go, just so you all know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a
Yeah.
complete
Well, this
sausage
is
fest.
Yeah.
Unless you're like Casara Vera, and then then maybe it's an extra sausage in disguise.
Yeah, well, I did really enjoy this conversation over the course of 2 hours. I like these conversations. They have something out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, I would
Hopefully there can be some other of these because I did see your comment on my religion debate. I would like to address in another stream, but
oh yeah, we'll get to religion. I think.
Yeah.
We'll
I would
get
like
to
to see
that
your
later
arguments
down
for
the-
that. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of the things that you said in that video just so cringy, dude. It's so like you and everybody, both sides. I mean, all four of you. I was just like, no, you none of you seem to understand
Honestly,
your position or the other side. I was kind of like,
all of it's cringy. Just
yeah.
I would have done
it's cringy, to be honest.
I would have. Looking back, I would have done it completely differently. Would have did it a different time, and maybe would have gone with a different opening statement. But that's
we're
all
getting
another
to
combo.
topic. So
But
I just want to wrap this video up, and we can
Yeah.
continue the conversation off the air. Thanks for joining the people who did. I'm planning on doing these every week. The time may change depending on other circumstances, but but it will be every Thursday from here on out. Thanks for joining, and we're gonna stop broadcasting. And I got to do the subscribe. You don't know how to use YouTube, so subscribe and like and comment and the Patreon. Wait, I don't have a Patreon. And follow me on Twitter and whatever, because apparently you don't know how to use social media. So I have to remind you at the end of every video. All right. Check you guys later. Bye.